What if I told you that right now, a plan is unfolding to strip Black Americans of their power and push them back into the shadows? On the surface, Trump's so-called rescue plan for America's capital looks like a crusade against crime, violence, and bloodshed. To many, it sounds like tough leadership, the kind of action a chaotic city needs. But dig deeper, and you'll see something far more sinister. Beneath the polished speeches and catchy slogans lies another policy targeting Black communities, the same communities that have historically carried the heaviest burdens of inequality in America. This is not conspiracy. It's not propaganda. It is happening in real time. And if nothing is done to stop it, the consequences could spread further and faster than anyone expects. So how exactly is this playing out? And why are Black communities once again in the crosshairs of American politics? Let's find out. In the 1960s, President Richard Nixon built his political brand on one phrase: law and order. To many Americans, it sounded like a noble mission, a stand against chaos. But behind closed doors, it meant something entirely different. Nixon's law and order was not really about crime. It was about cracking down on Black communities, silencing protests, and keeping neighborhoods under constant surveillance. It was a strategy of control, not protection. Fast forward to the 1980s, and the story repeated itself under President Ronald Reagan. His war on drugs became a war on Black America. Crack cocaine swept into poor neighborhoods, and instead of jobs, schools, or rehabilitation, communities were handed police, prisons, and punishment. Generations of Black men were swallowed by the system, families broken, futures stolen. And then, in the 1990s, came President Bill Clinton. With the infamous 1994 crime bill, he doubled down on the same playbook. Hidden behind the language of safety and reform was a policy that devastated Black communities for decades. More prisons, harsher sentences, and entire neighborhoods branded as dangerous. It was law and order once again, but its true meaning was clear: criminalizing Black life in America. Now, here we are in the year 2025, and once again, history is repeating itself. America's current president, Donald Trump, has decided to dust off the old playbook, one written by Nixon, Reagan, and Clinton before him. In the name of law and order, he has turned Washington, D.C. into a testing ground for policies that many fear are designed not to protect, but to oppress. On August 11th, in a speech broadcast live across the nation, Trump declared a crime emergency in the Capitol. With the stroke of a pen, he announced the federal takeover of D.C.'s police force. His words sounded polished, even reassuring to some. His administration was going to restore the city back to the gleaming capital that everybody wants it to be. But behind the rhetoric lies a darker reality. For critics, this move isn't about restoring a city, it's about silencing it. It's about militarizing Black and brown neighborhoods under the guise of fighting crime. It is about turning America's capital into a stage for a new, hostile experiment in power. In his own words, Trump declared, "Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act." You know what that is. And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under federal control. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reset law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they are going to be allowed to do their jobs safely. The announcement landed like a thunderclap. Washington's mayor and its police chief weren't briefed, weren't consulted, weren't even notified. They learned about the federal takeover in real time, as the rest of the country did, watching Trump make the declaration live on television. The way Trump framed it, you'd think the nation's capital had become a city under siege, a war zone, a lawless wasteland where crime had spiraled to unprecedented levels. In his speech, he painted Washington as a capital gone mad. Chaos in the streets, violence on every corner, instability at every turn. A capital so dangerous that only the heavy hand of federal control, backed by troops in uniform, could bring it back to order. But here's the question. Was this really about saving Washington from crime? Or was it about something else entirely? According to Trump, the only way to take back the city was through a federal takeover. But the numbers tell a very different story. In fact, they tell the opposite story. Reports show that violent crime in Washington, D.C. has just hit a 30-year low. Every major category, homicides, robberies, carjackings, is down, not up. Look closer. In 2024 alone, homicides in the city dropped by 30%. Robberies fell by nearly 40%. Carjackings, down by half. These aren't the numbers of a city spiraling out of control. These are the numbers of a city finding its footing again. And it's not just DC. Nationally, crime has been falling too. According to the FBI, murders across America dropped by nearly 15% in 2024. Violent crime overall declined by 5%. The trend is clear. America is not being swallowed by a new wave of violence. It is, statistically, safer than it has been in years. So what chaos exactly is Trump trying to reset? What instability is so dire that it requires deploying the National Guard into the nation's capital? The answer doesn't add up, unless, of course, this was never about crime at all. And that is where the truth begins to reveal itself. Because what Trump has launched is not a war against crime. It is a war against communities, specifically Black and brown communities, once again placed in the crosshairs of law and order politics. A familiar cycle, a familiar target, only this time in the heart of America's capital. Why do we say this is not about crime? Because Trump himself made it obvious. When he rolled out his plan, he made it clear that Washington, D.C. was only the beginning. His next targets: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Baltimore. And yet, just like in D.C., the numbers in these cities tell a different story. In New York, murders have dropped more than 20% this year alone. In Chicago, a city long painted as America's crime capital, homicides are down by a third compared to last year. And in Atlanta, police themselves admit that violent crime has hit historic lows. In other words, Trump's so-called crime emergency doesn't exist. The data exposes it for what it really is: a political performance, a staged narrative. His declaration is not rooted in reality, but in rhetoric. And as we've stated before, this has nothing to do with crime at all. So why these cities? Why now? The answer becomes clear when you look at what they all have in common. Each one of these cities, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Baltimore, is home to some of the largest Black populations in America. They are hubs of Black culture, Black business, Black political power, and that is exactly what's being targeted. These are not just cities. They are strongholds, powerhouses of Black leadership, immigrant communities, and the very idea of a diverse America. And when you look at the numbers, the picture becomes even clearer. Washington, D.C. is about 45% Black, one of the highest proportions of any major U.S. city. Atlanta, nearly 47% Black. It has long carried the title of the Black Mecca of America, home to some of the most influential Black businesses, universities, and political institutions in the country. Baltimore goes even further. With a population that is roughly 60% Black, it is a majority Black city with a majority Black leadership. Now, Chicago and New York may not have Black majorities, but they remain cultural and political centers of power. Chicago, with its 28% Black population, contains some of the largest and most historic Black neighborhoods in the nation. And New York, though only 23% Black, is a city of immense diversity, millions of immigrants, countless diasporas, and communities that represent the very fabric of multicultural America. Taken together, these cities are not just population centers. They are symbols of resistance, symbols of Black influence, immigrant resilience, and communities that have fought for generations to shape America on their own terms. And that is exactly why they are now in the crosshairs. Similarly, Los Angeles may only have around 9% Black residents, but it stands as one of the country's most prominent immigrant hubs. And not surprisingly, it has long been a frequent target of anti-Latino and anti-immigrant rhetoric. When you look across all these cities together, Washington, Atlanta, Chicago, Baltimore, New York, Los Angeles, you notice something deeper. They don't just have significant Black or immigrant populations. They are led by Black mayors. In Washington, D.C., you have Mayor Muriel Bowser. In Atlanta, Mayor Andre Dickens. In Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson. In Baltimore, Mayor Brandon Scott. In New York, Mayor Eric Adams. All of them Black. all of them standing at the helm of some of the most important cities in America. But here's what makes this more than coincidence. These leaders are not just mayors of cities. They are living symbols of Black political power in America, a power that was not handed down freely. It was hard fought. It was hard won after decades of exclusion, struggle, and sacrifice. And yet, this hard-won power comes with a unique and heavy burden. Unlike their white counterparts, Black mayors often inherit cities already scarred by decades of federal neglect, disinvestment, economic inequality, housing shortages, and spikes in crime driven not by culture, but by poverty, systemic racism, and a broken national system. And here lies the bitter irony. Instead of being given the resources and support to fix these long-standing problems, Black mayors are often vilified, their leadership questioned, their authority undermined. And now, under Trump's new campaign of law and order, their power isn't just being challenged, it's being stripped away, one declaration at a time, one city at a time. Their voices, and by extension the voices of the communities they represent, are being silenced under the shadow of federal control. Their cities are branded failures, their leadership labeled weak. But here's where things get interesting. Did you notice what Trump didn't say? He never called for a hostile military takeover in Portland or Denver. These are majority white cities that since the pandemic have actually seen crime rise. Think about that. If this were truly about fighting crime, why not deploy federal troops in places where crime is spiking? Why not declare a crime emergency where the numbers justify it? Instead, Trump has focused his crosshairs on cities where crime is falling to historic lows, cities where Black communities are strong, cities where Black mayors sit in power. The difference couldn't be clearer. It isn't crime that is being punished, it's Black leadership. Because in America, Black communities have long been stereotyped as crime-ridden, dangerous, and out of control, regardless of the facts. For decades, politicians have used this same trick, exaggerating crime in Black and brown neighborhoods, ignoring the real data, and turning law and order into a political weapon. From Nixon in the 1970s, to Reagan in the 1980s, to Clinton in the 1990s, and now Trump in 2025, the playbook has never really changed. It has always been less about fighting crime and more about controlling people. And in Trump's case, the message is loud and clear. To the mayors of these cities, Muriel Bowser, Andre Dickens, Brandon Johnson, Brandon Scott, Eric Adams, the signal is unmistakable. You are not in control. I am. And this isn't speculation. It has been confirmed by historians. Scholars like Khalid Gibran and Elizabeth Histon have pointed out that for decades, American politics has used crime as a proxy word. The so-called urban crisis, that was always about race. The war on drugs, a war on Black communities, and a crackdown on crime, code for cracking down on Black people. For a nation that claims to be the global champion of democracy, equality, and justice, it is appalling that in 2025, America is still wrestling with the same deep-seated issue, racism dressed up as policy. So here is the big question. Is Trump using fear of Black cities, Black mayors, Black populations, as justification for a federal power grab? Because when you strip away the speeches, that is exactly what this looks like. And we are not the only ones saying it. Washington's mayor, Muriel Bowser, has called Trump's actions nothing short of an authoritarian push. In Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson revealed that the city had received no formal communication from the White House about any deployments. Instead, he expressed grave concerns about what he called an unlawful deployment. His words were sharp. Trump's approach was uncoordinated, uncalled for, and unsound. Across these cities, the alarm bells are ringing. What Trump calls law and order looks increasingly like an unprecedented federal takeover, one aimed not at saving lives, but at stripping power from the very communities that have fought hardest to gain it. Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago has been one of the most vocal critics. Along with other U.S. mayors, he has called on the Trump administration to restore more than $800 million in violence and crime prevention grants that the Department of Justice has withheld, money that was frozen in an attempt to force states and cities into cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. Johnson made it clear, these anti-violence programs have a direct impact on our work to reduce crime and violence in Chicago. Sending in the National Guard could destabilize our public safety efforts and would be counterproductive to rebuilding trust between residents and law enforcement. His words cut to the core of the issue. What Trump is doing, Johnson argued, is not about fighting crime. It is about criminalizing poverty. He accused the president of stoking fear, sowing division, and destabilizing communities instead of addressing the root causes of violence. And Johnson is not alone. In Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass warned that what is happening in Washington, D.C. could be just the beginning. She called Trump's move a dangerous precedent, an open door to further illegal power grabs. Her words were chilling. The president can say, well, we can take over your city whenever we want. I am the commander-in-chief, and I can use the troops whenever we want. I think that is an abuse of our troops, and I think it is an overreach of presidential powers. Together, their warnings frame the bigger picture. Trump's campaign of law and order isn't just a crackdown on so-called crime. It is a direct assault on local democracy, Black political power, and the very principle of self-governance in America's most diverse cities. This is dangerous because it sets a precedent. Think about it. If the federal government can invent a crisis, declare a so-called crime emergency in a majority Black city, seize its police force, and call it restoring law and order, then no Black city in America is truly safe. Trump's most recent declaration is just one in a long line of decisions and policies that seem to specifically target Black Americans. On paper, he pledges support for Black communities, signing an executive order to promote excellence and innovation at historically Black colleges. But behind the headlines, the reality looks very different. He has signed orders designed to sanitize the country's history of race, stripping away the truth of slavery, segregation, and systemic racism. He has gutted the U.S. Department of Education, crippling programs that serve vulnerable communities, and perhaps most devastating, he has dismantled federal diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. That single move has already triggered mass firings across federal agencies. For generations, federal service has been one of the few stable pathways into the middle class for Black families, a ladder of opportunity that provided jobs, stability, and dignity. Now, that ladder is being kicked away, and what replaces it? A government that seems determined to erase Black voices from its institutions, its history, and now its cities. The truth is, none of this is a coincidence. Since taking office on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Trump's most aggressive actions have consistently targeted historically marginalized groups, and the pattern is impossible to ignore. In just the first month of his second term, we have already seen a wave of policies that are not just controversial, they are blatantly illegal, unconstitutional, and bizarre. They hit Black Americans the hardest. Trump has attempted to freeze federal funding, shut down critical federal agencies, curb the rights of workers, and dismiss public servants en masse. All of this, paired with a Republican-led push to use budget reconciliation as a weapon, cutting funding for Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, food assistance, and public education. Strip away the political spin, and the truth becomes clear. These are not isolated moves. They are part of a shameful American tradition, a tradition of systematically dehumanizing, disenfranchising, and stealing from Black Americans. From slavery to Jim Crow, from the war on drugs to the crime bill, and now to Trump's so-called crime emergencies, the story is the same. Different era, different language, same outcome. The question now is not whether Black America is under attack. The question is whether America itself is ready to face this truth, and whether enough people are willing to resist before history repeats itself once again. But why are Trump and his allies doing this? The answer lies in power and in wealth. At its core, this is not about crime, not even about public safety. It is about consolidating control, about dividing Americans so the collective power of the people can never truly challenge the interests of the elite. What we are witnessing is a carefully staged spectacle designed to shock, overwhelm, and distract. While the nation argues about crime emergencies in Black cities, the wealthiest few tighten their grip on the banking and payment systems that fund public spending, looting the infrastructure built with taxpayer dollars. And the script they are following is not new. In state legislatures across the country, the far right is working to suppress the real history of racism in America, erasing the truth about slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and Black progress. But at the very same time, The new Trump regime is copying from that very history, particularly its most violent chapters: slavery, post-Reconstruction terror, Jim Crow segregation, the Tulsa Massacre of 1921, voter suppression, redlining, police killings of Black Americans. Every one of these moments in history was not random. They were all hostile backlashes against Black progress, against Black power, and Trump's policies today echo those same patterns of backlash. His aggression, however, doesn't just connect to Black history in America. It harkens back to America's darker playbook worldwide. The US government and its military once crushed indigenous peoples in North America. It colonized and destabilized nations in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. These violent and anti-democratic tactics used abroad are now being repurposed at home. You see, throughout American history, the ruling class, the holders of the most wealth, the most land, the most property, have almost always looked the same: overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, cisgender, Christian. This small group has not only dominated politics, but also the boardrooms, CEOs, shareholders, directors of the largest corporations. They have set the rules, and for generations, they have reaped the rewards. And today, it is this same cohort consolidating even more wealth and power, while unleashing the full force of structural violence and state authority on Black Americans, immigrants, women, LGBTQ+ communities, and other marginalized groups. They have simultaneously rewritten the narrative to make themselves appear as victims. At the very highest levels of government, officials post openly about Nazis, while others promote the racist conspiracy that white Christian men have been disenfranchised by diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. The irony is staggering. Those who have always controlled the system now claim the system is against them. Those who have always benefited from privilege now insist they are the oppressed. And while that false story is amplified, the real story, the erosion of Black progress, the dismantling of civil rights gains, the stripping away of economic opportunity, is buried under the noise. What we are witnessing is not just hypocrisy. It is a deliberate political strategy to weaponize fear, to turn lies into policy, and to cement a hierarchy that keeps power in the hands of the same ruling class that has always held it. These executive orders, like so many others, may not immediately rewrite the law or erase congressional spending, but they send a terrifying signal. They point toward a future where air and water protections are gutted, where critical social services are stripped away, where millions could be laid off, and where the cost of survival is pushed directly onto families who are already struggling. For Black Americans, who already pay a higher share of their income on essentials like housing and utilities and are more likely to be low-income renters, this burden is even heavier. And in this era of climate disasters, the danger becomes catastrophic. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires. These crises already hit Black and low-income communities the hardest. Relief and recovery programs are often the thin line that keeps households from collapse. But if Trump cuts those federal lifelines, the outcome will be devastating. Entire communities could be displaced. Generational wealth, already fragile, could be wiped away completely. So the question now is this: what can Black Americans do to counter Trump's targeted policies? Because if nothing is done, it will not stop here. It will get worse. What do you think? Can these policies be resisted, or is America watching in real time the unraveling of decades of progress? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world.